Go.
Good evening and welcome to the Medgar Evers College Presidential Lecture Series, Decoding Social Justice with Dr. Patricia Ramsey. I'm Kimberly Whitehead, Senior Vice President for Strategy and Chief of Staff. This session of the lecture series is focused on access to advocacy through criminal justice reform. It's my pleasure to introduce President Ramsey and our guest tonight, Eric Holder, 82nd Attorney General of the United States. Dr. Patricia Ramsey was appointed by the City University of New York Board of Trustees to serve as the 6th president of Medgar Evers College effective May 1st, 2021. She is the first woman and first scientist to serve in the role, and after only a short time as president, was named to City and State's 2021 Brooklyn Power 100 list. Distinguished as a national role model by Minority Access Incorporated, Dr. Ramsey is a national and international leader and scholar with a deep commitment to excellence and a passion for making a difference. President Ramsey has been named to City and State's Higher Ed Power 100 list that will be announced later this month. Through her presidential theme, Access, President Ramsey is moving Medgar Evers College forward to its next level of excellence. Our guest, Mr. Eric Holder, served as Attorney General from February 2009 to April 2015. As the third longest serving Attorney General in U.S. history and the first African American to hold that office, Mr. Holder is an internationally recognized leader across a broad range of regulatory enforcement, criminal justice, and national security issues. In 2014, Time magazine named Mr. Holder to its list of 100 most influential people, noting that he had worked tirelessly to ensure equal justice. Including his tenure as Attorney General, Mr. Holder has served in government for more than 30 years, having been appointed to various positions requiring U.S. Senate confirmation by Presidents Obama, Clinton, and Reagan. We are delighted to have both President Ramsey and Attorney General Holder in this space with us tonight. President Ramsey.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Whitehead, and thanks to all of you for joining us this evening. It is just truly, truly an honor to have the opportunity to chat with our first African-American Attorney General of the United States. And so I'm going to start by asking Mr. Holder to tell us about growing up and his period leading up to appointment as the first Attorney General, first Black Attorney General of the United States.
Well, thanks, President Ramsey, for having me here with you today. You lead a great institution in New York, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to interact with your community. I will start off by just saying, I was just a kid who grew up in New York City. I was born in the Bronx, in Hunts Point. I lived for the first couple of years in my life in Manhattan and Harlem at 147th Street and 8th Avenue. My family then moved out to Queens, where I spent a good portion of my life. Went to high school in Queens. I went to elementary school in Queens, PS 127, PS 148, PS 145, junior high school, and then I went to high school in Manhattan. So that is, that's who I am. I then went to college in Manhattan at Columbia. Went to law school in Manhattan, Columbia Law School. I am a New York City kid. I always thought that I was going to come back and live in New York. I clerked down here in Washington, D.C. at the Justice Department after my second year in law school. Took the New York bar, again, expecting to come back to New York. But I actually kind of started to like Washington, D.C., and I've been here for about 40 years now or so. But I still think of New York as home. And when people ask me, well, when are you going home? I always think about New York before I think of Washington. I still root for the Knicks and all the New York teams. I've never, the Knicks continue to disappoint me. We haven't had a championship, I guess, since 1973. And so I'm just, as I said, I'm a New York kid.
When you were speaking about going to school and you mentioned Columbia, our first guest, former New York Governor Dave Paterson, the first and only Black governor of the state of New York, spoke about a relationship that you all have. Kind of tell me about that special connection that you all have.
Yeah, I was in law school when Dave, Governor Paterson, was at the college, and we would hang out, do the kinds of things that young guys would do. Went to parties, we were studying. He was in the college, I was in the law school, but I got to know him pretty well, and he was, a good student, a serious student, but also a guy who knew how to have fun. He was a good person to hang out with. And we stayed in touch over the years. He was, a great political figure. I think he was a great governor, and he's continuing to do good things. He's a good guy.
Well, since we did share with him that you will be on, perhaps he will tune in to see what you actually had to say about him. Thank you. Can you tell us what your biggest challenge was as Attorney General?
It's interesting. I mean, I started off back in 2009, in February of 2009, and had a variety of things that we had to deal with. Starting right off, we had to make determinations about what we were going to do with the allegations that the United States had tortured people in connection with the 9/11 bombings in New York City, tortured people who were captured to try to get information out of them. So that was something. Consistently had to deal with the question of voting rights, trying to protect people's right to vote. And so there were a variety of things. It's interesting, you go into these jobs with an idea about the things that you want to do, and then situations just change. And I'm sure you've had the same experience, at Medgar Evers, where you come in with some priorities, but then something comes in on a day that you don't expect, and you've got to, direct all of your attention towards it. And so national security issues was something that we had to really deal with early on. As the Attorney General, I sat on the National Security Council, and so had to be met with President Obama almost like on a daily basis in the Situation Room to go through a whole variety of things, including, ultimate life and death things about if we're going to order drone strikes. Who could, the Justice Department had to sign off on the legality of a potential drone strike. And those were the kinds of things that made the job both obviously very serious and also something that was exhausting on that consistent basis to have to make life and death decisions, both with regard to drone strikes and then death penalty decisions. It was a job that I held for, as you said, 6 years. But by the time I left the department, I was ready to get away from it. It was a job that kind of wore me out.
Yeah, I really can't say that I understand from the vantage point of where you're speaking. And oftentimes when people hear of attorney, anything, they don't think about the types of things that you had to endure in that role, and especially the life and death decisions that would affect a large number of people. So on the opposite side of that question, what was the most satisfying accomplishment during your tenure as Attorney General?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. That's almost like asking me to decide which of my 3 kids do I like, the most. And on a given day, I can give you an answer. I can tell you, well, I like this one I'm not. But I would think that in terms of the things I'm most proud of, and I think give me the greatest satisfaction, I think one would be the decision to try the 9/11 terrorists in the federal courts in New York. A decision that I made that we were not able to carry out because of political opposition. As a result of that opposition, these people were never tried. In fact, they're still in Guantanamo now. And so that happened, 9/11 happened in 2001. It's over 20 years ago at this point, and they've never been brought to justice. So that decision, I had faith in our federal courts to bring those cases. The work that we did to protect voting rights, I'm proud of that. The work we did to try to help reform the criminal justice system, to make the system more fair, to make it less race conscious, I'm proud of that as well. And so I think those are the things that when I think about what I'm most proud of, I think those are. And I think one other one, and that would be the decision, not to defend the Defense of Marriage Act, so that same-sex marriages could occur in the United States. When you looked at the history of the Defense of Marriage Act and what was said about people in the LGBTQ community, it seemed to me that that was something that the Justice Department should not defend. And so I'm proud of the decision we made there, not to defend that statute.
Well, thank you. And you mentioned a number of things, and one of them being the situation with the criminal justice system. And so over the past couple of years, a lot of attention has been drawn to that through the death, for example, of Trayvon Martin 10 years ago, and you were AG at the time. And we're in the fight right now for the treatment of Blacks within the criminal justice system. So where do you think we are as it relates to that fight of treatment of Blacks within the criminal justice system?
Yeah, I think we've made progress. Things are better now than they were. And I think unless we are willing to say that and recognize that, you really do a disservice to people who sacrificed a great deal to make that progress possible. But having said that, we're not close to where we need to be. Race is still something that permeates our society as a whole, the criminal justice system in particular. When I announced our criminal justice reform effort back in 2013, we did a study of the federal system. And if you looked at a white defendant and a Black defendant, similarly situated, who had committed, the same offenses and who had similar backgrounds, same criminal history, they were basically the same person, but for their race. What we found was that the white defendant received a sentence that was 20% lower than his Black counterpart. And that was just one example of the way in which the federal system was unfair. And I think we see it in the state systems as well, where we see disproportionate numbers of young African-American men who go to jail for disproportionately long periods of time. But I think the other part of it is that you also see young Black men who are disproportionately the victims of crime. Blacks make up about 12, 13% of the population, and yet we're about 50% of the nation's homicide victims. And so, we want to make our criminal justice system more fair, certainly more fair than it is. But we never want to forget in those efforts that there are, substantial numbers of African Americans, substantial numbers of people of color who have to be protected, by that same system.
Well, thank you. Now, at Medgar Evers College, we have a Center for Law and Social Justice, and headed by an attorney, and we have students that actually work in that center. So what advice would you offer students who are thinking about entering into the legal profession, and how do we get more Blacks into the legal profession that might impact what you just shared with us about the criminal justice system?
Well, I would encourage all of your students, unbelievably gifted, superbly trained, to think about a career in the law. Lawyers, there you hear a lot of lawyer jokes and all that stuff, but lawyers have an ability, because of the skills that we have, the way in which we are viewed by society. People in the law have the ability to be change agents. If you look at the changes that have happened in this nation over the course of over 200 years, it's lawyers who are almost always at the forefront of positive change. And so I would say to your students, to the extent that you're thinking, you're looking at society, you're not satisfied with the way it is now constructed or the way in which particular people are treated in society, think about a career in the law. Now, you don't have to, major in anything specific to, go to law school. I majored in American history. I had law students who, majored in chemistry, biology, sociology, whatever. You can have, I think the best law students are those who have a pretty broad level of, experiences before they get there. And then you concentrate on, what it means to be a lawyer. But I think, reading and becoming familiar with history, I think that helps a lot in terms of of the law and being successful in law school. But I would, as I said, I would urge as many people who are listening today and people who are at Medgar Evers to think about careers in the law.
Well, thank you for that, and I hope our students are listening and realize that you're needed in those positions, and also you can even aspire to become an Attorney General of the United States, like our guest here today. Now, we are an institution that is named for the civil rights activist Medgar Evers, and this institution was birthed out of the community with social justice in its DNA. And so I was just wondering if you have any ideas of how we could collectively strengthen social justice.
Yeah, I think that, we have to understand that the issues that we confront, issues of, discrimination, unfair treatment, all of these things these are man-made problems. These are not issues that are there because they are found in nature. I mean, we're dealing with things that are a result of decisions made, by men. And so these man-made problems are susceptible to man-made and woman-made solutions. And so I think that's the thing that I think we should be optimistic about, that there are ways in which if we get involved, we can have a positive impact. But the reality is that, you have to be engaged. You have to be about taking action. Positive change is not promised. It only happens as a result of commitment, action, sacrifice. If you look at the great social movements in our history, everything from women getting the right to vote, the civil rights movement, the fight for LGBTQ equality, all of these things happened because groups of people got together, decided that they wanted to bring about change, and then came up with ways in which they were going to bring that change about. And everybody has got that capacity. Everybody, all of us, so-called ordinary citizens. We're not ordinary citizens. We're all extraordinary citizens who have the capacity to bring about change. And I would say even the responsibility to bring about change. And for young people in particular, you might think, well, I'm too young. What is it that I can do, at this young age? The reality is, if you look at the founding fathers of this nation, those were all young people. Every founding father was young, except for Benjamin Franklin. I mean, Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence when he was in his 30s. And if you look at them, they're all in their early 30s. These are young people. And so the ability to be a young person and have an impact on the society that you're not satisfied with is there. But it means you have to get involved. It's not enough to simply watch television and yell at Fox or yell at MSNBC, yell at CNN. The question is, what is it that you are doing to bring about the change that you want? But it is possible.
Well, thank you. And as you were speaking, I was listening intently and also thinking about. I think we need to stop for a moment and talk to one another without judgment. We make decisions about people that we know nothing about, and then we take this position on faulty information, and so the conversations don't happen. Recently, I'm making an observation about something as important as education, and how we had some of our leaders in Washington just really saying some things that were not very appropriate if it is a nation that is working together to be able to lift up young people and help them to know that it's so important to be educated. And so some conversations I feel are necessary, and we have to have those conversations without all of the judgment that tends to come with these people who seem to oppose one another, and in many instances don't even know why. So thank you. Thank you.
But see, your point, I think, is a really important one. You have to interact with people who disagree with you if you want to bring about positive change. mean, Dr. King, positive change really is a function of persuading people to take different views, to change laws, to change customs. Dr. King was successful because he persuaded the people in this country, white folks in this country, that that system of American apartheid was wrong and that the laws needed to be changed. It wasn't only talking, he didn't only talk to people who agreed with him. He had to go across the aisle, reach across, the ideological chasm to convince people who didn't agree with him, try to convince them that they, in fact, their views were not correct, that they were wrong, and then persuade them to accept his worldview and the solutions that he was putting forward. So I think your point about giving people the space to raise things and the ability to interact with one another, to persuade people is really, really critical. It is not simply a question of only talking to people who agree with you.
Right.
That's great. That's a good way to organize. But then once you've organized, what are you going to do to persuade other people to believe in the positions that you think should be put in place?
Yeah, I'm a botanist by training, and one of the things that I observed in looking at plants, when you go to tropical areas, you don't see any stands of plants that are the same. You'll see a mixture of those plants because they support one another, and that if all of them were the same and a pathogen came along, it wipes out all of the species. And so if people could kind of take some examples from nature, I think that we also could be better off. Yeah, if we had a stand of plants that are all the same, then if something comes along, one thing, like for example, we're in we have Omicron, and it seems to be now some additional surge that is being seen in the waterways. Well, if every single person was the same, then we all would be gone because we would have that same makeup. So it's great. The differences are great, and people need to see them as that. And so with me, I always go back to, let me just take a look at nature and see what's going on there. So thank you for that robust response to the question. Now we're really in an exciting time because we have in Washington a lot of buzz going on because President Biden has nominated Ketanji Brown Jackson for the Supreme Court, and if she's confirmed, she'll be the first Black woman to serve. So can you share your perspective on this nomination and the upcoming confirmation process?
Yeah, she is an eminently qualified person to serve on the Supreme Court. She was a great lawyer. She was a great judge at both the district court level, that's the place where trials occur, and also as a great appellate judge as well. She's young, she's vital. She is, as I said, eminently qualified. And the vote in the Senate ought to be 100-0. There's really nothing about her that would even come close to disqualifying her for the position. Unfortunately, we live in a really divided time. And I've seen some comments by some senators that are pretty offensive and have nothing to do with the reality of who she is. So I expect that she's going to be confirmed. I expect that there will be some bumps along the way, that they're going to say, there will be things during her hearing that are going to be, from my perspective, offensive, problematic. But she's also a person who I think's got the ability to, I'll probably be more bothered by the stuff than she will be. She'll be calm, she'll keep her cool during the hearing, and I expect that once she is confirmed and is on the court, she'll be a real force. It'll be good to have an African American woman on the United States Supreme Court, and to bring that perspective to the decisions that court has to make. We are much better. Entities are all better when they have diverse people in them. My staff at the Justice Department, when I was Attorney General, I tried to make it as diverse as it possibly could be. The Supreme Court will be better for her being on the court, to have her there with Justice Sotomayor to bring a certain perspective about people of color. That is, I think, going to be something that will serve the court and the nation for the time that she's on the court. So hopefully she'll be there for 30 years or so, or longer than that.
Yes, I really am really excited about the possibility, and related to what you said in your earlier response, the ugliness that comes out at times when people see something that they feel is going to in some way hurt them, and how, I have no idea, but they make up these things in their heads, and then they take a life of their own. So she's definitely going to need our support and our prayers going into the hearings for sure. Now, you have an upcoming book, Our Unfinished March, that's focusing on the history of our fight for the right to vote. And we spoke a little bit about it before we went on the air. Can you tell us a little bit, give us a snippet about the book, and when we can expect to be able to purchase it?
Yeah, the book comes out on May the 10th. It's called Our Unfinished March, and it's really about the history of voting and the fight for voting rights in this country. And it starts at the beginning of the nation and takes us all the way up to the present. And it ends with me sharing some proposals that I have about how we can protect our democracy in the 21st century. It's an interesting thing. The struggle for voting rights that we have going on now is really not something that is new. People tend to forget that the civil rights movement that Dr. King led really was primarily about getting African Americans in the South the right to vote. And that's the thing that really animated the civil rights movement. Those 3 civil rights workers who died in Mississippi were all out. They were out trying to register people to vote in Mississippi. Medgar Evers, when he was killed, was carrying, I talk about this in the book, was carrying some T-shirts that were designed to get people registered and in the fight for voting rights in Mississippi as well. He was a warrior for voting rights. But it really goes back to the beginning of our country. It's the first chapters talk about how white men were trying to get the right to vote. I mean, if you look at George Washington's election, the very first election, only 6% of people who were of voting age, only 6% actually cast a ballot. And you had to have property. You couldn't be a woman. You couldn't be a person of color. And so the first struggle is for white men who did not have property to get the right to vote, then women, then people of color, young people. And so we go through that history. We talk about the present problems that we are confronting, where I think one party, the Republicans, unfortunately, are trying to make it more difficult for people who are not Republicans to vote. And then it talks about proposals that we have about universal registration, letting people vote by mail, expanding the size of the Supreme Court. It's a whole variety of things. So I think it'll be a pretty good book. It's an easy read. I didn't want to write like a law school review article or something like that. This is so that regular people can read it and understand both our history, the nature of the problems that we face today, and hopefully consider some of the proposals that I make about the future.
Well, we're looking forward to May 10th to be able to get copies of your book. And now I'm going to want a signed copy from you.
You got it.
You all saw that, right? So I have it. Thank you. So how can students be a part of what you call Our Unfinished March?
Yeah, I think that identifying a cause, identifying what is it that most troubles you about the state of the nation? Is it that one party is trying to make it more difficult for people to vote? All right, if that's what you want to focus on, well, then figure out what institutions, what organizations are engaged in the fight for voting rights. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund. There are a variety of organizations. Fair Fight. I mean, there are a variety of organizations. Do your research, get online and see what organizations are engaged in the fight. If there are other things, if you're interested in the fight for reproductive rights, if you're interested in the fight for criminal justice reform, find the organizations, find the the groups that are involved in those fights, and then volunteer your time. Now, I want everybody at Medgar Evers to be studying. You're a student, and that's the first thing I want you to do. I want you to get good grades and work hard, turn in great papers, learn all the great things you can from the wonderful faculty there. But in the time that that you have, that little personal time, use a little bit of it. It won't take much, a couple hours a week to be a part of some effort to make the nation better. And if you do that, you're going to feel better about yourself, and you're also going to make the nation better. You should never underestimate the capacity that you have as involved, engaged, intelligent young people to bring about positive change in this country.
Well, thank you so much. I'm just so sad that our time is coming very close to an end. And so I'd just like to know if you might have any parting thoughts that you'd just like to share with our audience before our program ends.
Yeah, here's what I'd say. I've talked about Dr. King a lot here, and I think that he's one of my heroes. Medgar Evers, one of my heroes. Malcolm X. These are all people who are, from the civil rights movement, who are my idols. I'd go to Dr. King's words that he said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But here's the deal: it doesn't bend on its own. It only bends when people like us, people like you students at Medgar Evers, put your hands on that arc and pull it towards justice. And so I think the questions you have to ask yourself is, what are you doing to bend that arc towards justice? What are you doing to make this nation better? What are you doing to make this nation more fair? Certainly, you've got to study hard, and you've got to prepare yourself through the interactions you'll have with the great faculty here at Medgar Evers. Prepare yourself educationally for that which is to come. But I would hope that whatever it is that you do, whether you're a lawyer, a teacher, whatever it is that you become, that you'll always be a warrior for justice. As I said before, find a little time in your week now as a student, and continue to do that when you become an adult. Find a little time in your week to come up with ways in which you can make this nation better. We have that possibility in front of us. We have to seize that possibility and make the United States all that it can be. We've made a great deal of progress, but we still have a long way to go to get to the place where our nation's founding ideals say we should be. That we don't have enough equality, we don't have enough justice, we don't have enough fairness in this country yet. But we can get there if you all will make it happen.
Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate you sharing with us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been having a conversation with our first Black Attorney General of the United States, Mr. Eric Holder. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you for joining us for this presidential series. And thank you, Mr. Holder.
All right, thanks for having me.